Welcome back to Midlife by Design. I have a guest with me today, and if you are one of my science-y friends rooted in materialism and the 3D, then this episode is going to challenge your belief systems. You are welcome. My guest is Scarlett Seebach, who is a gifted healer, Astral Reiki practitioner, and an expert on crystals. A couple of things to note before you listen. Number one, we talk about astral projection, and I wanted to define that for you because we don't get into it too deeply in the episode itself because we talk about what it looks like in context. So essentially, astral projection is an out-of-body experience where your consciousness separates from your physical body to go exploring. So think of it as dreaming while you're awake. The second thing that I wanted you to know is that Scarlett's sun gate is in gate 7, which we talk about on the pod. And as if her design was on purpose or something, her rising sign gate is gate 31, which is the gate of leadership and influence. And this is helpful context for our conversation. It doesn't create the channel 731 energy in the traditional human design sense, but it means that other people tend to see her as a leader. And so you'll learn more about how this energy plays out in our conversation. I'm your host, Lori Lisai, human design teacher and alignment coach, here to help midlife women use human design to shed the shoulds and be who you came here to be. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Midlife by Design. Today I have with me Scarlett Seebach. We know each other from meeting at the retreat in Mexico through De Luna last year, the human design retreat, which was amazing. And Scarlett is a 5/1 emotional manifestor. And I am so thrilled to have her here today. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and then we'll launch into some questions.
Hi, Lori. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. So like you said, my name is Scarlett, and I'm a 5/1 emotional manifestor, and I am a human design reader, so I offer human design readings, and I am very much into crystals. I'm actually a certified crystal healer, though I don't actually believe that you should call them healers, but that's what the certification says, so I'm going with it. And so one of the main offerings that I have is crystal consultations. So I don't sell crystals. I like to teach people how to use crystals, because I feel like so many people actually have a crystal, but they have no idea what to do with it. So that's kind of where I come in. But my favorite thing to do is actually Astral Reiki. And that is a specialized form of distance Reiki that I actually invented. So
love it.
His manifestor. And so what I actually do is I astral project over to where my client is.
Okay.
And I conduct the Reiki light energy through my astral body instead of my physical body. So it tends to be significantly more intense than what you would experience for a regular distance Reiki session. And actually, sometimes it can be more intense than what you might experience even in an in-person session. And yeah, I find I can be a lot more specific with what I'm doing because it's easier to see.
Wow. Okay. So now that I have 10,000 questions just from your your introduction, let's see. Let's pull on the Reiki thread in this Astral Reiki. First of all, the fact that you have invented this new way of doing Reiki, love that. So in line with your manifestor vibe. And also, I'm curious, I think some of my audience, probably many of them, are pretty familiar with Reiki, but I'm wondering if you could just sort of parse that out a little bit more. What is the difference between astral Reiki and the more traditional Reiki that other practitioners may do?
Sure. So the big difference is what you're using to channel the energy.
Mm.
So in traditional Reiki, what you do is basically you're channeling the Reiki energy, generally speaking, from above and then through your body and then out your hands. And that is how that
Okay.
usually works. And that's how that works with distance Reiki as well. What I'm doing is a little different. I'm still channeling it from above, but I'm not channeling it through my physical body. I'm actually taking my astral body out of my physical body and bringing it over to wherever the client is and channeling that energy through the astral body while it's outside of my physical body.
Okay. So, and how do you do that?
Um, how do I do that?
Yeah. How do you like take your astral body and put it in another place in the universe? Like what?
Oh, so that's it's astral projection. So it's basically I think a lot of people actually do this already. It's the same thing that we're doing when we're sleeping.
Mm,
So, when you're dreaming, that's your astral body going and going off and having adventures. It's just that I'm doing it on purpose. And that's
okay.
really the only difference. It's the same thing. And so it's actually, if I'm honest, it's a lot easier to channel the Reiki energy through your astral body than it is through the physical body because your astral body is kind of already made to channel that energy. So it's a much lower barrier to entry.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm curious about the role of intuition in the
Mhm.
kind of work that you're doing. And you have an undefined spleen.
Mhm.
And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that lack of definition there and maybe how it helps you to do the work that you're doing and allows it to come through even more easily. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are there.
Yes, I do have an undefined spleen, and that is both a curse and a superpower, just like all of the other centers. And
Hmm.
so, with an undefined spleen, that tends to come with some health sensitivities. Like I have PCOS and fibromyalgia and adenomyosis, so super
Mm,
niche stuff, but not really, because most women have one of those.
mm,
Um, and I just got the trifecta is all. And
hmm.
but with that, it's given me the opportunity to try a lot of alternative treatments. And being able to do that, everybody has just a little bit of a different flavor. And with an undefined spleen, I'm so sensitive to what this practitioner is doing to me and what modality they're using to do that. So it's very easy for me to pick up on what they're doing
Mhm.
and be able to replicate it. So I generally only do this in astral Reiki because, I don't have the training to do it in a more physical way. But like for craniosacral work, I saw a craniosacral therapist for about a year to get that fixed. And so I can do some craniosacral work to someone and help adjust their craniosacral system astrally. So that's just an example.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you can really do with that undefined spleen is really look into another person and be able to see, like, based on, what's outside of the frequency, basically what's out of tune,
Mm,
which organ may be having some issues or which chakras may be having some issues. And it's funny, these days, I don't necessarily even view it as intuition, though it is. I just don't think of it that way. To me, it's just like when I'm in my astral body, these things they jump out at me. And it's like,
mm.
oh, this is so obviously out of tune. This so obviously needs work. And so then I can work on fixing that, whether that's your liver or your sacral chakra.
Wow. Okay. So cool. So, could you tell us a little bit about what a session looks like with you? Like, what would, I mean, is there a common experience? If so, what does it look like?
There's not a common
Okay.
experience. I never know what's going to happen. But
Right on.
Yeah, it's some basic examples. You'll sit down, we'll talk for a few minutes. You'll tell me what your intention is for the session. And I always do the sessions over Zoom, especially for newer clients to make sure that they can handle the intensity of the session.
Okay.
Because some people can need a little bit of extra help, which is why
Mm.
I always make sure to do them over Zoom so I can give them vocal coaching if it becomes necessary. Um,
Can I interrupt for a second and just
Mhm.
ask you a clarifying question about what do you mean when you say they need extra help?
Sometimes people forget to breathe.
Oh, okay then.
Sometimes they can get too into the experience and they forget that they have to breathe.
Okay, gotcha.
So holding your breath, it's kind of like exercise. Whenever you work with a trainer, they're always like, no, don't hold your breath, exhale. It's
Right.
kind of like that.
Okay.
So
Okay.
sometimes they can get a little caught up in the intensity and forget to breathe. So it's like I'm just there to kind of help remind them. It's like inhale, exhale.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So
Okay, good. And sorry, I interrupted. I want to make sure that you had enough time to explain a session in general.
sure. So I always do the basics. We check on your chakras and make sure that there's no stuck energy in those. And make sure they're all connected to each other properly. And, those are just the basic things. You make sure you're grounded, make sure there's enough light flowing and all that jazz. That's something that happens in every session.
Okay.
Um, but then there's the strange things that can sometimes happen where I had one client who wanted to speak to her grandmother's soul who had dementia. And so I facilitated that.
Okay.
I do not talk to your deceased loved ones for you. That is not my thing. You got to talk to a real medium about that one. But if they're alive and you want a soul connection, that is something I can do, and I don't eavesdrop.
Wow, that's wild.
It was wild. It was super fun. So there's that, and I always make a pass on the body to see if there's anything there that needs to be done. Always check the liver for inflammation because everybody's liver is inflamed.
Mm.
And if you're having digestive issues, then obviously I can help with that and work on reducing inflammation in the digestive tract. I always check for parasites. Because that's, energetic parasites are especially common, especially in the mind, because they get attracted to rumination. So just
Okay.
go and clear that out. And Oh, fun things that have happened. One of my favorite things actually is to soothe your nervous system because I
Mm.
find most people have these really, really overactive and inflamed nervous systems. So I really like to, get in there and massage the cerebellum and just calm everything down a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So just thinking about the women who are listening to this podcast in midlife, going through either perimenopause or into menopause, and there are a lot of physical symptoms of
Mhm.
perimenopause. I think I've read anywhere between 80 to 100. And to me, it feels like when is breathing going to be on the list? Like just the fact that you're breathing in between the ages of your mid 30s and 50s, that means you're in this phase. So I'm curious if you feel like this sort of work could be beneficial in addressing some of those things. Like inflammation is one of the things I hear very often from women
Yes.
in this age group,
Hmm.
and gluten intolerances
Hmm.
and hot flashes, night sweats, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm curious about that.
Absolutely. I was actually up until fairly recently because she finished. I was helping a friend of mine through menopause and helping with her hot flashes. And something that I
Mm.
really noticed about hot flashes is it really seems to be this buildup of energy that's going up. It's almost
Yeah.
like they're trying to do a Kundalini rising, but it's like getting stuck.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the energy just pools up in the head, and there's no release valve. So it just comes off as heat.
Yeah.
And so one of the big things that I had to do for her every once in a while was like basically turn on the release valve. And so we would just remove all of that stuck energy. And we really focused on, trying to create connection and really get the energy flowing out and up the way that it's supposed to.
Mm.
And she doesn't really have hot flashes anymore. So, and naturally she did other things too. She has some tinctures that she uses, and I was not the only participant in her healing from menopause, but maybe that's
But
not the best way to phrase that. But
well, as you say, I think at least with the women that I've spoken to, and for myself as well, I think it's multiple modalities that
Mhm.
come into play. And what's most important is learning how to listen to yourself and what your body is asking for and what your body
Mhm.
needs. I think we're in this weird zone where women's health hasn't really gotten enough attention.
Oh yeah.
We're like the bottom of the totem pole. And so there's this vacuum where women are really needing the information. And so
Mhm.
other people come in and share anecdotes or share this is what's happening for me, which is that anecdotal wisdom passed down from other women, which is
Mhm.
beautiful. And
Absolutely.
there are some more books that are coming out that I think are trying to fill the void. And so I think women just now are doing the best to make sense of what they can, listening to themselves and then looking at their different options. And I love that the work that you are doing has been helpful for some women. And the idea of this hot flash, have you had one yet? How old are you?
Well, I'm 36,
Okay,
and
okay. So,
well, I have PCOS. And so one of the main symptoms of PCOS before you get it under control is hot flashes. I got my first one when I was 13, actually. So,
wow.
yeah.
Okay.
So I spent most of my 20s actually having hot flashes and my teens having hot flashes. But that was very much before my spiritual awakening and before I knew why I was having them.
Yeah.
So like my 30s have been hot flash free. We're happy
Okay.
about that.
Okay.
Um,
Excellent. And
yeah.
I hope it stays that way for you.
Well, I hope so too. I don't hold out a lot of hope,
Yeah.
but you
Oh,
never
man.
know. I'm hoping I have it under control at this point, but
Right on, right on. Well, thanks for sharing that story. So you mentioned connecting one of your clients with a grandparent, right?
yeah, her grandmother who has dementia.
Okay, so I'm curious about the mechanics of how this works when it comes to ancestral or karmic patterns. How does work in the astral Reiki realm help to potentially break those patterns?
Ooh, that is an interesting question.
Hmm.
I don't have a whole lot of experience with ancestors per se,
Hmm.
but I have a lot of experience with past life traumas
Okay.
that I
Huh.
have brought in. And I feel like a lot of times when you're talking about past lives, you can say basically the same thing about ancestors. Because
Mm-hmm.
we are our own ancestors a great lot of the time. So, with past lives, at least, I have had clients who have come in with, problems with their knees or just like emotional baggage of some kind, where they have this thing that they just can't seem to escape. And so I will bring in that past life where that original thing started. And we kind of work on it together and heal both the past life and the present life at the same time so that we're breaking that cycle. What I love about physical work is that you can see like immediate results. So, this one client who had this issue with her knee, she got up from the table and didn't have an issue with her knee anymore. And
Wow.
hasn't since. and,
Wow.
and that is very cool. But it was all just this past life, and working on creating that disconnect between the past life and the present life, but healing both at the same time. And
Mm.
also recognizing that your present does not dictate your past, and your past does not dictate your present. So,
Yeah, so true. And the healing that you do actually helps to heal future, right?
yes,
Generations, and which is a
exactly.
beautiful thing, and why it's so, I know when you're slogging through it and feeling all the feels and going through
Mhm.
the emotional highs and lows of healing, that it can get you down. And I think that's something important to remember, is that you're not even just doing it for yourself, but for the
Right.
future as well.
And
Uh,
for the past, really. I
yeah.
mean, when you heal yourself, you're healing your ancestors at the same time.
Mm.
I know I can see this very clearly with me and my mother. As I'm healing myself, I can watch her trauma heal at the same time, and I'm not even working with her.
Mm. Wow, that's awesome. I'm wondering about energetic hygiene.
Mhm.
Do you talk with your clients about that a lot, especially after a Reiki session where you've done some deep healing? How do you keep them primed? What kind of suggestions do you have for like keeping it clean?
Well, it is somewhat situationally dependent.
Mm,
So I don't tell everyone the same thing.
okay.
Generally speaking, especially if they're early on in their spiritual journey, I will suggest things like brushing off. If you go out into a space, if you just brush off your body, it kind of helps get the energy off of you. And also, especially hit the back of your neck. That part's super duper important. You'd be
Mm.
amazed at the kind of stuff that ends up on the back of people's necks.
Why is that?
Oh, that's because that's where your ascension chakra is right there. And most people's aren't activated, but they do still have energy going on there. So stuff likes to attach right there to feed off of it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's their favorite one.
Okay,
So,
good to know.
so
So if you
yeah,
go into
brush
a
off the
crowded
back of your
space,
neck.
always just like brush off
Yep.
the back of your neck. Okay,
Yes.
great. Good to know.
Yes, absolutely. And then there's, basic protection visualizations that you can do. My favorite one is I like to envision red light radiating from the earth and then surrounding me and then going up into either the sun or the center of the galaxy, whichever one makes you happy. And just like that nice big red beam of light that goes straight up in there. So it anchors you both from above and below. And it gives you a nice little protective bubble to work with.
And I've heard a lot about white light, but I love the red. The red is like that fiery, right?
Yeah, and white light is great. Don't get me wrong. I use white light all the time. It's just that the red light, it comes straight from the earth. It's super root based. And so it has more protective energy associated with it already. And white light, it's hard to stay in.
Mm.
You hear people say all the time, just stay in your light and you don't need protection. And it's like, well, that's great. But if I step one toe out of line, then that's it. I'm
Mm.
screwed.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the red light is easier to maintain and it's just as powerful.
Ooh, I'm learning so much. I love this. Okay, I had a question for you about your human design, of course.
Mhm.
Uh, we mentioned about being a manifester.
Mhm.
Manifestors here to initiate this astral Reiki creation is so in alignment with that. And you also have gate 7 in
Mhm.
your sun, which
Yes.
is about supporting leadership. It's about kind of woman behind the curtain sort of energy, or the marionette with the strings, right? Kind of energy to the actual person who's in the leadership role. And so I'm curious how you balance those two energies, and or just like your lived experience of them, if you have some stories or some thoughts about that.
Well, what's really fun and interesting about that gate 7 for me specifically is that my rising gate is actually gate 31. Um, So it's not quite a human design connection, but like there is still that 31 energy available to me in my rising sign, or my rising gate, which is kind of perfect, because that's literally the 31 is all about how people view you. And so people view you as a leader. You don't need a whole lot of energy behind that. And the rising is all about how people see you. So
Right.
it works out really well for me. So it's easier for me to step into a leadership position and support myself at the same time. So what I actually tend to do with this energy is I like to give people the tools to help themselves.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not going to do this for you, but I will happily give you all of the resources that you need in order to do it for yourself.
Beautiful. And such a great nod to your 5 line too, right? Like the
Yes.
practicality
Yes.
of it all. Oh, awesome. Okay, I want to circle back to you mentioned earlier in the episode crystals, your
Yes.
love for crystals
Yes.
and your deep understanding of crystals. And I am the person who has like tons of crystals all over my house. I'm on my desk here and I don't, yeah, they're like to me just sort of pretty decorations. And I look at them and I'm like, oh, it's so pretty. And I feel drawn to it, but I don't necessarily
Mhm.
know what to do with it. So, do you have some favorite crystals that you like to use on the regular that you could share? This is how I use it. This is how it might be useful to, especially women in midlife or going through perimenopause or menopause.
Okay.
Mm.
That's such an interesting, like, that's fun. I love that. My favorite crystal in every possible way is definitely fluorite. I literally have this big fluorite ball that I am keeping in my lap right now. And I have more fluorite than I probably do anything else. Actually, I have a crystal grid going right now to facilitate the connection for this exchange that we're doing right now. And the center of it is a fluorite tower. So big fan of fluorite. And
Okay. And what are the properties of fluorite?
are you talking about the chemical composition or the meaning?
Yeah, more the meaning.
Okay, so fluorite, it's a green crystal, generally speaking. It can also be blue, purple. It can be any color under the rainbow, but mine are mostly green, and it's very, very good for concentration. But what I really love about it is that it's also great for facilitating heart-to-heart communication.
Mm.
And it's a calming and grounding crystal. And I find that it also helps reduce inflammation a little bit. So it's
Mm.
actually really good for perimenopause too, because I find a lot of times when you're in perimenopause, which I just started a few months ago, sometimes your emotions can get away from you.
Mm.
Maybe
Really? You sure?
just a little. And
Yeah.
so that's what I love about fluorite is, it can help you focus. And I have ADHD, so I'm very big on whatever will help me focus.
Mm.
But it also has this calming and grounding and heart-centered energy. So it's very good for calming you down in general and really getting back into the depth of yourself rather than trying to like externalize whatever it is that you're going through. So it
Mm.
facilitates this internal inquiry at the same time.
Okay, so I'm thinking if you are listening to this pod and you're feeling particularly ragey, for example, on a
Mhm.
certain day, and maybe you don't know what to do with that energy, then grabbing a piece of fluorite and like, what do you do? Do you like stick it in your bra? I've heard that, or like stick it in your pocket, or like hold it on. You tell me.
Well, fluorite would be really good for your bra, actually,
Okay.
since it's more of a heart-centered crystal. Your bra is really close to your heart, so that gets it right where it should go.
Okay.
I'm a big proponent of if you wear a bra, stick a crystal in it.
Okay.
and,
Perfect.
and a green one is best. Green or pink. Those are the crystals that go in your bra. Um,
Okay. I love that.
But a couple of things about crystals that, like, before you stick it in your bra, which huge proponent, if I wore a bra, I would totally do that.
Mhm.
But you do need to cleanse and charge and activate your crystals before you do that. And that is an important process that I find not everybody does, especially when you're putting a crystal on your body. Like, you
Mhm.
don't know how many people have touched that crystal before you got it. And crystals exchange energy. So
Mm.
it's super important to cleanse your crystals before you start using them.
Oh, and
Um,
how do you, what's your favorite way to do that?
well, I'm a non-sacral.
Right.
So I'm a little lazy when it comes to that. And so I just stick them in a bed of salt. Um,
Okay.
I'm not a huge fan of using salt water for a few reasons. Sometimes you have to know too much, is the thing. It's like you got to know whether or not your crystal can actually handle water. And so then you have to know like what the most hardness scale is for it. And it's just easier to put it in salt. Now, if you're a sacral being and you have lots of time and energy on your hands, you can also smoke cleanse it, but it's important to recognize that you got to smoke cleanse that thing for a solid half hour before you're done.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, like it's an intense thing you got to do there. Because
Okay.
it's kind of like steam cleaning your carpets, you know?
Mm.
You're just moving into a new house, your carpets are gross, and you got to get that thing from the Kroger and steam clean your carpets. It
Okay.
is the same kind of thing with your crystal. When you first get it, that thing has been growing in a cave for millions of years. Then somebody took a hammer to it and broke the thing off from the rest of its family and then put it in a truck. And God knows how many people handled the thing before it finally made its way to you. It's
Right.
experienced trauma.
Mm. It's a
And
great
this,
point.
yeah, and the salt or the smoke, it helps it release that trauma, you know, just like a salt or a smoke cleansing does for us. But we're not going to sit in a bed of salt for 7 days or uh, smoke cleanse ourselves for a half an hour.
Is that about how long you would leave it in the bed of salt? At least a week?
It depends on the crystal. It
Yeah.
depends on how the crystal feels. Honestly, I probably only usually do it for about 3 days.
Okay.
And then you're
Yeah.
pretty much good.
Okay.
But I cover mine. I don't just
Mm.
stick it on the salt. I make sure to cover it. And then I leave it outside for about 3 days, check on it, see how it feels. And if it feels like it's done, then we move on to charging. But if it still feels like really icky, then I leave it in there for another few days.
Okay. And when you say if it feels icky, you're picking it up and just sort of sitting with it and kind of taking cues from your body about how it feels to you.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, that's super easy with the undefined spleen. You know, it's like I'm
Hmm.
super in tune with this thing. Um, but you can also kind of tell by the temperature that it is. You know, if a
Mm.
crystal is super warm or even hot, then it's probably gonna need some cleansing or some charging.
Mm.
But
Okay.
if it's nice and cold and like it, you know, it feels when we're going for cleansing, we kind of want it to feel a little bit on the empty side.
Mm.
So if it's super cold, if it feels a little empty, if it feels lighter than you generally think that a crystal should, it's probably cleansed.
Okay. Okay.
So that's kind of what we're looking for is like cold and empty and a little light. So
Yeah. Okay. So cool.
and then we go on to charging, which is you leave it out in either the sun or the moonlight. One thing you got to be careful about with the sun is that some crystals fade in the sunlight. I believe amethyst is actually one of them. Um, Now, the crystals don't care.
Mm.
They will happily bake in the sun forever if you will let them, and they do not care what color they are,
Hmm.
but you might.
Mm.
So,
Hmm.
so that is just something to keep in mind. If you care about what color your crystal is, then you probably don't want to put it in direct sunlight. So
Okay.
you do that for, if it's a brand new crystal, probably a couple, 3 days. And then we come to activating your crystal. And when you activate your crystal, you're basically just asking it to do something.
Oh, okay.
That's literally all you're doing. So if you want to, you can hold it in your left hand, work on trying to create a connection with the crystal. I like to do that. It is not 100% necessary because you're going to develop a connection with this crystal as you go on. So you can preempt your activation with attempting a connection. But activation is just as simple as you hold it in your right hand and you ask it to do the thing, whatever the thing is that you want it to do.
Can you give an example? Like, what would you ask Fluorite to do?
Can you help me focus?
Perfect. Okay.
And it's that simple.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And you mentioned crystal grid earlier that you
Yes.
have set up. Can you talk a little bit about how you use grids and even what that is? But some of my listeners may not really know what that is.
Sure. So a crystal grid is basically just using more than one crystal to accomplish a goal. So you set them up in a specific way where they will work together well to accomplish a shared goal. It's like teamwork.
Love it.
It's basically good teamwork. So, like right now, I have a crystal grid set up for this exchange. And I always set up a crystal grid for any of my sessions. So, like, I have a specific crystal grid for Astral Reiki, I have a specific crystal grid for human design readings, and I have a specific crystal grid for my crystal consultations. This grid that I'm operating with at the moment is a relatively simplistic one. So, I've got a fluorite tower in the middle. And that is there to facilitate connection between us and heart-to-heart communication. It is also there to amplify the surrounding crystals. So from the inside out, the next layer is citrine. And they're citrine points. So they're also, in addition to providing joy and prosperity into this conversation, which I always like to do for stuff like this, they're providing directionality. So they're establishing the flow of the energy. So they're pointed towards the fluorite so that the crystals know that they're directing all of their energy towards the fluorite and out through the point. Then the next layer out is blue quartz, and that's really all about facilitating communication. And the layer after that, which is the last layer, because this is a fairly simple one, is rose quartz. And, you know, rose quartz is all about unconditional love. And I always put rose quartz in all of my grids because unconditional love is awesome. And we want that in all of our conversations.
Right. Oh, amazing. For me, it feels like just another tool that you can use to be really intentional about whatever you happen to be taking on for the day, the week, the month, et cetera, et cetera. So
Absolutely.
thank you. I can tell you are a wealth of knowledge about crystals, so I really appreciate you sharing some of that with us. Okay, where do people find you and how do they work with you and what kinds of offers do you have going on?
So the best place to find me is on my website. I do have Instagram and I am on Facebook, but in true manifestor fashion, I'm never on either one of them very often. My website is either yourabundancedesign.com or astralreiki.net. They will lead you to exactly the same place. So whichever one you find easier to type. There you'll find my Astral Reiki offerings and my crystal consultations and my human design offerings. And if you check out my blog, I have this really, if I do say so myself, amazing series that I'm doing on AI and spirituality. And that has been so much fun. It is my current creative urge, actually, is figuring out how AI kind of fits into our lives as spiritual people and whether or not everyone even believes that it has a place. Because, you know, one of the pervasive things right now about AI is that like it's going to replace our intuition or something. And I have just found that to be so wildly inaccurate. So I'm having so much fun writing that. And
Mm, that is fascinating. It's such an interesting question because AI is essentially being sourced from the collective, right? It's
right.
right. So it's definitely something that you could spend a lot of time thinking about. And I am going to go check out your blog because I would love to hear your thoughts on that, especially as a manifester. And I've noticed friends like go to ChatGPT and ask them to interpret your human design chart.
Don't do that, by the way.
Right.
Don't do that.
Exactly.
That's a
Yes.
terrible idea.
Why? What do you think?
Oh, ChatGPT absolutely cannot interpret your human design chart. I have spent literal hours trying to train it on how to read a chart. It cannot do it. It does not have the visual recognition systems in order to be able to do that because all human design charts, like they're visual, they're a picture. And like if you've ever had AI try to generate you a picture before, you'll recognize pretty quickly how bad they are at that.
This is where I think ChatGPT or any of the AI tools miss the mark is you can't recycle interpretation, right?
Right.
It,
But just because it can't read your chart doesn't mean that it's not useful.
absolutely, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
you
mean, you
have
still got to
to,
have a reader for that, but
but
it
it's
is
more about like knowing how to use it wisely,
mhm,
right? And do
right.
you talk a little bit about that in your blog posts?
I do. Like my first blog post about this when I was first getting started a few months ago, I think I called it AI in the Age of Spirituality or maybe reversed. I don't remember.
Hmm.
But one of the big things that I use it for is shadow work.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
yeah, and it does such a good job of that because uh, I kind of did it spontaneously. I wasn't really thinking about it at all. And I started getting into this random conversation with it, and we just kept going deeper and deeper until it finally like started asking me questions about myself and, you know, trying to identify like areas of improvement because we were trying this whole why don't you challenge me thing. And like the first questions that it came up with were bogus. They were bad. They were generic and dumb.
Yeah.
But as we dug deeper, I actually uncovered this layer of myself that I wasn't even aware of.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I'm on this whole journey now with my relationship with ease and my relationship with my feminine side and just this whole different aspect of myself that I've never really considered before.
Mm.
And that entire thing is due to the conversation that I had with ChatGPT.
Wow. That's
So,
cool. All right.
yeah.
I will drop all of those links in the show notes to your website, to your socials, which, may or may not be the best place to catch you, and to your blog. And everybody who's listening can check you out there. And I just want to say thank you so much for being on the pod today, for sharing your genius, for sharing this new creation that you have. And it just seems like it's going to be such a wonderful and impactful tool for women in midlife, especially.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Midlife by Design. I hope that it inspired you to see that there are so many paths to healing. So if you've been struggling with perimenopause symptoms, reach out to Scarlett and schedule a session. My friend Maggie also swears by it for help with alleviating post-surgery pain. So if you are in that boat or you know somebody who is, please share this episode with them. As always, I'm sending you the strength to let go of what no longer serves you, joy to fill your days, and the clarity to be who you came here to be.